People always talk about gut feelings, but I used to laugh them off. I thought I was rational, a man who believed in facts, not intuition. But standing outside that hotel room in Miami, balancing a bunch of orange and yellow flowers, I felt something in my chest, a weird pressure, almost like nerves before a big game or a presentation, except this time I couldn't name the reason. If I could go back, I'd tell myself to trust that feeling, to turn around right then and there. But that's not how real life works. That morning had started off like every other day on vacation, sun streaming in through the hotel curtains, the sound of distant waves, and Emily humming to herself as she got ready in the bathroom. I remember looking at her and thinking how lucky I was. I mean, she looked happy, her eyes bright, her laugh unforced. At breakfast, she joked about how I always ordered the same thing, scrambled eggs and too much coffee. We made plans to meet up for dinner after she finished a little work call in the afternoon. She insisted it would only take an hour. Corporate stuff, she'd said, brushing a strand of hair behind her ear. You know how it is. I spent most of the day wandering the city doing all the tourist things, hitting up the Art Deco district, grabbing a Cuban sandwich, letting the sun bake the tension out of my shoulders. I even picked up a cheesy souvenir for Emily, a little glass flamingo, because she collected kitschy stuff from everywhere we went. Miami felt like a fresh start for us, or at least I hoped it could be. By mid-afternoon, the weather turned. Clouds rolled in and the beach emptied, leaving the air heavy and humid. I figured it was as good a time as any to head back. On a whim, I stopped by one of those sidewalk flower stands, haggled with the vendor over a handful of bright blooms, and started back to the hotel, feeling a little ridiculous but optimistic. Maybe things were finally turning around for us. I took the elevator up to our floor, humming some song that was stuck in my head. As I walked down the hallway, I heard laughter, Emily's voice, unmistakable, then a deeper one I didn't recognize. I paused outside the door, telling myself not to be paranoid. But the laughter cut off sharply when I slid my keycard in and pushed open the door. The whole scene froze like a movie when someone hits pause at the exact wrong moment. Emily stood by the window, her phone visible for half a second before she stuffed it behind a cushion. Trevor, her colleague from work who I'd met once or twice, was there too, standing awkwardly in the middle of the room. His shirt was unbuttoned, hanging off his shoulders, and his face was flushed like he'd been caught in the middle of something he couldn't explain away. I blinked, stunned. The flowers nearly slipped from my hand. For a moment, the only sound in the room was the thud of my own heart. Hey, I said, my voice cracking. Didn't expect company. Emily didn't miss a beat. Mark, you're early, she chirped, flashing me a smile that felt too bright, too forced. She walked over to me, stopping a little too far away for comfort. Trevor was just helping me figure out what to wear for the company party tomorrow. He has good taste, and I wanted a second opinion. Trevor coughed and buttoned up his shirt, mumbling something about running late for a meeting downstairs. He wouldn't look at me, wouldn't even meet my eyes as he grabbed his jacket off the chair and practically bolted from the room. The door clicked shut behind him, leaving the two of us in thick, uncomfortable silence. I stood there, flowers hanging at my side, trying to process what had just happened. The room still smelled like her perfume, sharp and citrusy, mixed with the subtle, unfamiliar scent of someone else's cologne. My mind raced. Why was Trevor's shirt undone? Why had Emily hidden her phone? Why was she acting like everything was fine when it so clearly wasn't? I managed. You needed help picking an outfit? My voice sounded thin, almost childish. Really? Emily rolled her eyes. Oh, come on, Mark. Don't start. You always do this, make something out of nothing. She moved past me to the bed, fluffing the pillows like she was tidying up, but really, she was avoiding my gaze. I told you about the company party. Trevor's been helping all the women with their outfits, not just me. I stared at her, searching her face for any sign that this was normal, that I was just being crazy. But her expression was unreadable, cool, almost rehearsed. Why did you hide your phone? I asked, a little too quickly. She turned, sighing as if I was a child who'd spilled juice on the carpet. Seriously, Mark? Are you jealous again? Trevor was just here for a few minutes. He's gay, you know, besides, you're always so suspicious for no reason. She laughed, but it was a brittle sound, not the kind that warms a room. You've really got to stop overthinking things. It should have reassured me. Maybe it would have if she hadn't said it with that edge in her voice, the one I'd started hearing more and more over the last few months. It was her case-closed voice, the one she used to shut down any conversation she didn't want to have. I felt like I was being boxed in, accused of something just for noticing that things weren't adding up. I tried to let it go. I wanted to believe her. I handed her the flowers. She took them but barely looked at them, dropping them on the table with a distracted, "Thanks, babe." She walked into the bathroom, shutting the door a little harder than necessary. I sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the place where Trevor had been standing. The imprint of his body was still visible on the comforter. Part of me wanted to laugh at how ridiculous this all was, how I'd managed to turn a simple surprise into a confrontation. Another part of me, the part I'd been ignoring for too long, was screaming that something was seriously wrong. A minute later, Emily came out, her face composed like nothing had happened. She picked up her phone, flicked through her messages, and said, "We should get ready for dinner. I made a reservation at that seafood place you wanted to try." Just like that, the topic was closed. But as I got changed for dinner, I caught her checking her phone again, fingers flying across the screen. She kept glancing at the door as if she was waiting for someone else to walk in. When I asked if she was okay, she just smiled too wide, too bright, and said, "You really need to relax, Mark. It's vacation." I told myself I was imagining things. That I was being paranoid, insecure, maybe even a little controlling. But I couldn't shake the image of Trevor's shirt or the way Emily had shut down my questions before I could even ask them. The rest of the night felt off, like I was performing in a play where everyone knew their lines except me. Back in the room later, as Emily laughed at some joke on TV, I tried to push the doubts out of my head. But as I lay there in the dark, listening to her soft breathing beside me, the scene replayed over and over, the hidden phone, the unbuttoned shirt, the easy lie. I wondered if I'd ever really know what had happened in that room, or if Emily had already decided I never would. That was the first real crack, the moment I started seeing everything differently. It was the first time I wondered if maybe, just maybe, I was right to be afraid. After that strange afternoon in the hotel, I couldn't let it go. I tried, God knows I tried. I kept telling myself it was nothing, that I was reading into things because of my own insecurities. But every time I closed my eyes, I saw the flash of guilt on Emily's face and the way Trevor all but sprinted out of the room. It's amazing how, once you let yourself question something, the whole story you've been telling yourself starts to unravel. Lying there in bed that night, staring up at the ceiling fan spinning slow circles, I started replaying the last few months in my mind. All those moments that I'd shrugged off, that I chalked up to stress or coincidence, suddenly took on a new color. A darker color. It started with the late nights at the office. Emily had always been driven. She's the kind of person who can't leave an email unanswered for more than 10 minutes, who has to be the first in and the last out. At first, I was proud of her. She was moving up at her company, winning awards, getting noticed. I figured the extra hours were just the cost of success. But lately, those late nights had turned into almost every night. There was always another deadline, another team meeting, another client dinner. Some nights she didn't come home until well past midnight, slipping into bed quietly while I pretended to be asleep. When I asked her about it, she always had an answer ready. "It's just a busy quarter, Mark. I know it's *CKs, but it'll slow down soon, I promise." But it never did. In fact, it got worse. Then there were the corporate trips. Emily had always hated traveling for work. She said the hotels were lonely and the meetings were tedious. Suddenly, though, she seemed to have a new enthusiasm for business travel. Just a quick overnight in Atlanta, she'd say, or it's only a weekend in Chicago, nothing exciting. She'd come back tired but somehow energized, like she'd been on vacation instead of at a conference. She'd always bring back souvenirs, a snow globe, a mug, a new scarf, and stories about funny things that happened with her team. I wanted to believe her. I needed to believe her. Looking back, I realized how much she'd started to hide her phone. It was never out of her sight, always face down on the table or tucked into her purse. If I happened to glance at her screen, she'd quickly lock it or swipe away whatever she was looking at. She stopped leaving her devices out in the open. I remember once, just a few weeks before our trip, I'd asked her if I could use her phone to check the weather. My battery was dead, and she hesitated, just for a second, before handing it over. It was only a heartbeat, but it was enough to plant a seed of doubt. "Sorry, just a work message," she'd said, flipping through her apps before handing it to me. Already on the weather page. It's funny how money gets tangled up in these things, too. For years, Emily and I had counted every purchase together. We'd sit down at the kitchen table and go over our expenses, making sure we were on the same page. It wasn't glamorous, but it was us. Then, little by little, expensive things started to appear. A new gold necklace, sleek and understated, that she claimed was a bonus for finishing a big project. A pair of designer heels. "Got them on clearance," she insisted, waving off my questions. Even her wardrobe had changed. Her dresses were more fashionable, her bags a little more high-end. She brushed it all off as deals and discounts, perks from her job, girl stuff that I wouldn't understand. But the biggest change, the one that hurt the most, was how distant we'd become. We used to be close. I don't mean just physically, though that had changed too. We used to share everything. Dumb memes, secrets, worries, dreams for the future. Lately, though, she'd grown cold. When I reached for her in bed, she'd flinch or turn away. Our conversations became one-sided, like she was always distracted by something or someone else. I tried to talk about it, to ask if she was okay, but she'd just snap at me. "I'm tired, Mark. Stop making everything about you." I felt like I was walking on eggshells in my own home. Even the small rituals disappeared. She stopped leaving me little notes in my lunch, or texting me cute photos from her day. She'd come home late, mumble something about being exhausted, and head straight for the shower. If I pressed her for details about her day, she'd get irritated or defensive. "Why do you always have to interrogate me?" she'd say, her tone sharp enough to make me back off. And yet, I kept convincing myself that it was just a rough patch. Every couple has them, right? Work gets stressful, people drift, but you power through. I kept telling myself that if I was patient, if I just gave her some space, things would go back to the way they used to be. But now, sitting in that hotel room, I started to realize how much I'd been fooling myself. The cracks had been there for months. I just hadn't wanted to see them. One memory kept coming back to me. About a month ago, I'd woken up in the middle of the night and realized Emily wasn't in bed. I wandered out into the hallway, half asleep, and found her sitting in the living room, hunched over her phone. When she heard me, she jumped like she'd been caught doing something she shouldn't. "Couldn't sleep," she'd said, her voice shaky. "Just answering some emails." I believed her because I wanted to. Now I wasn't so sure. Even her friends seemed different around me lately. They used to invite me along for drinks, include me in group chats. Recently, though, they'd stopped reaching out. At a barbecue a couple weeks before the trip, I overheard one of them whispering to Emily, "Did you tell him yet?" Emily had shushed her quickly, casting a nervous glance my way. When I asked her about it later, she said it was girl talk, nothing you'd be interested in. It all added up to something I didn't want to name. Some nights, I'd catch myself staring at the ceiling, wondering if I was just paranoid, if maybe I was the problem. I started going over my own flaws. Had I stopped trying? Had I been too distracted with work? Was I too controlling, too boring, too needy? I even Googled things like, signs your partner is cheating, hating myself for it, but desperate for reassurance. Every sign seemed to point to the thing I feared most. Still, I clung to denial. I made excuses for Emily, the way she made them for herself. She was tired. She was stressed. Her job was demanding. That's what I told myself. But the harder I tried to convince myself, the louder that small, insistent voice in my head became. Something is wrong. After that day in Miami, it was impossible to ignore. Every sideways glance, every secretive smile at her phone, every expensive new thing she couldn't quite explain. They all piled up, forming a wall between us I couldn't climb. I wanted to talk to her about it, to demand the truth. But every time I opened my mouth, she'd shut me down. "Not this again," she'd say, rolling her eyes. "I can't do this with you right now." It was always the same script, and I kept playing my part. The trusting husband, the one who gave her the benefit of the doubt, the one who didn't want to believe what was staring him in the face. But after that afternoon in the hotel, the story started to change. The details of the past came back with a vengeance, and this time I couldn't look away. That same evening, I told myself I needed to clear my head. After all, it was just one strange moment, right? One weird misunderstanding that I was blowing out of proportion. I wasn't going to be that guy, the insecure husband who saw ghosts around every corner. So after Emily said she needed a nap before dinner, I figured I'd head downstairs to grab a bottle of water from the hotel bar, maybe sit outside by the pool for a while. Something simple, something normal. Anything to shove the ugly thoughts out of my head. The lobby was crowded. Families checking in, couples laughing, a few business types clacking away at their laptops. It made me feel almost sane again, like maybe I'd been caught up in my own imagination. I bought a bottle of water, stepped outside, and let the humid evening air wrap around me. And that's when I saw them. At first, I thought my eyes were playing tricks on me. Maybe it was just two people hugging, saying goodbye. Maybe it wasn't even Emily. But the closer I got to the beach, the clearer it became. There she was, Emily, standing barefoot on the sand under the fading orange sky, her hair blowing in the wind, laughing in that unmistakable way she did when she wasn't holding anything back. And there, standing way too close, was Trevor. His hand was wrapped around her waist. He leaned down and kissed her, slow, familiar, like it wasn't the first time. She didn't push him away. She didn't even look around to see if anyone was watching. Instead, she threw her head back and laughed, pressing her forehead against his like they were in some cheesy romance movie. I stood frozen on the edge of the patio, the water bottle slipping from my hand and rolling into the bushes. I felt everything in me drop, like a trapdoor had opened under my chest and I was falling, falling, falling. It was like watching a building collapse in slow motion. Every memory, every sacrifice, every promise we had made, all of it came crashing down right there on that beach, and there wasn't a damn thing I could do to stop it. Part of me wanted to scream her name. Part of me wanted to storm over there, grab Trevor by the collar, and demand answers. But I didn't move. Couldn't. My legs felt bolted to the ground. I just stood there, watching the woman I loved betray me out in the open, like it was the most natural thing in the world. They stayed like that for what felt like forever before finally breaking apart. Trevor said something that made her laugh again. An easy, relaxed laugh, the kind I hadn't heard from her in months. And then they started walking back up the beach, hand in hand, like they didn't have a single care in the world. I backed away before they could see me, heart hammering against my ribs. I stumbled through the lobby, back to the elevators, feeling like I was going to throw up. When I got to our room, Emily was already there, stretched out on the bed in one of those silky robes the hotel provided, scrolling through her phone like nothing had happened, like she hadn't just ripped my heart out 10 minutes ago. She looked up and smiled, casual as anything. "Where'd you go?" she asked. I stared at her, wondering how many times she had lied to my face without even blinking, how many times she had smiled at me while sneaking around behind my back. "Just grabbed some water," I said, my voice sounding strange and hollow to my own ears. She nodded, yawning like she was bored. "I was thinking we could order room service tonight. I'm too tired to go out." I wanted to laugh. Tired. Of course she was tired. Being two different people must have been exhausting. We sat there in silence while she clicked through Netflix, asking me half-heartedly what I wanted to watch. I didn't answer. I just stared at her, memorizing everything. The way she tucked her legs under her, the way she bit her lip while concentrating, the way she glanced at her phone every few minutes like she was waiting for a message. She caught me staring eventually. "What?" she said, frowning. I shook my head. "Nothing." She rolled her eyes and went back to scrolling. Later that night, after she fell asleep beside me, I lay awake staring at the ceiling. Her breathing was slow and even, completely at peace. Meanwhile, I felt like my skin didn't fit anymore, like my body was too small to hold the grief and anger building inside me. At some point around 2 in the morning, she stirred and mumbled, half asleep, "You're so distant lately," as if I was the one who had changed, as if I was the problem. I didn't answer. What could I say? She had already decided the story she was going to tell herself, and in that story she was the victim and I was the bad guy. When morning came, Emily acted like nothing had happened. She kissed me on the cheek, talked about maybe doing a boat tour, asked if I wanted to grab brunch. I went along with it, smiling and nodding because I wasn't ready yet. I needed more than just the sight of them on the beach. I needed proof. Real proof. Proof she couldn't deny, twist, or gaslight me about. Because deep down I already knew the woman I had fallen in love with, the woman I had married, was gone. All that was left now was the wreckage and the question of what I was going to do about it. The next morning, while Emily was in the shower, I finally did what part of me had been too afraid to do for months. I went through her purse. I felt sick as I did it, like I was violating some sacred trust. But then again, Emily had already violated much bigger things, hadn't she? Compared to what she'd done, digging through her bag felt almost quaint. It didn't take long to find it. Tucked between her wallet and a half-used tube of lipstick was a second phone. Not her usual sleek iPhone, the one she was always glued to, but a cheap burner, the kind of phone you pick up at a gas station and pay for with cash. My stomach twisted into knots as I turned it on, my hands shaking so badly I almost dropped it. There were no security locks. No passwords. It was like she hadn't even bothered to hide it properly, as if she thought I would never look. As if she thought I was still the same blind, trusting fool I had been. The screen lit up instantly, and with it a whole new version of Emily's life. Dozens of messages. Not just to Trevor, but to other men too, men I didn't even recognize. The conversations were explicit in asterisk mate, casual in their betrayal. Photos exchanged. Flirtatious jokes. Plans for secret getaways. Complaints about me, about how I was holding her back, how she was done pretending to be the perfect wife. I scrolled further, my heart sinking with every new revelation. One thread in particular caught my eye, messages between her and Trevor planning how she would transition out of our marriage. She talked about how she was lining up a promotion at work, about how she was going to convince our company, the one we both had a stake in, to side with her during a messy divorce. She joked about me, calling me pathetic and too soft to ever fight back. Trevor replied with laughing emojis and comments about how easy it would be to squeeze me out. It wasn't just an affair. It was an ambush. They hadn't just betrayed me personally, they were plotting to destroy me professionally too. Everything I had built, every late night and sacrifice I had made to build a future for us was just a pawn in her little game. I sat there on the edge of the bed, the burner phone heavy in my hand, feeling the rage coil inside me like a living thing. For a few minutes I couldn't move. Couldn't think. Couldn't breathe. I wasn't just losing my marriage. I was losing my career, my reputation, my entire life because the woman I loved wanted a shortcut to a bigger paycheck and some cheap excitement on the side. By the time Emily came out of the bathroom, wrapped in a towel and humming to herself, I had already hidden the phone back in her purse and composed myself. She flashed me a smile, the same smile she used to melt my heart, and started talking about what she wanted to do that day. She had no idea. No clue that the walls were closing in. I nodded along, pretending to listen, pretending everything was normal. But inside I was planning. I spent most of the day gathering evidence. *TS. Backup copies of the phone contents. Anything and everything that could prove what she had been doing. I wasn't going to confront her yet, not until I was ready. I was done being the emotional wreck. It was time to be strategic. Cold. Focused. Meanwhile, Emily continued living her double life without a care in the world. Until the universe stepped in. That night, after dinner, Emily insisted on going for a walk on the beach. I wasn't exactly thrilled at the idea of pretending everything was fine, but I agreed. We strolled along the shore, the waves lapping at our feet, the stars starting to peek through the twilight. Emily was giddy, laughing too loud at nothing, touching my arm as if we were still a normal couple. I played along, watching her like a stranger. A little farther down the beach, we came across Trevor. Because of course we did. He was drunk, swaying slightly, a beer in hand. And he wasn't alone, he had a few other people with him, all similarly loud and intoxicated. When he spotted Emily, he called out to her, slurring her name. Before I could react, Trevor stumbled toward us, arms wide like he was greeting an old friend. Emily! There you are. Emily froze, her whole body going rigid. Trevor kept going. Come on, babe. Come party with us. I glanced at Emily, and for the first time I saw genuine fear flash across her face. Not fear of me. Fear of being exposed. Sorry, Emily said quickly, grabbing my arm. We're just heading back to the hotel. Trevor laughed, clearly not getting the memo. Bring your husband. He can watch. The people around him snickered. I felt the anger surge up again, but I kept my face neutral. I didn't give him the satisfaction of a reaction. Emily practically dragged me away, muttering under her breath about how Trevor was such an idiot when he drank, how he always got too loud. We barely made it halfway back to the hotel when flashing lights filled the beach. Police cars. Apparently, someone had reported suspicious activity, probably a concerned tourist seeing a group of drunk adults causing a scene on a public beach. In minutes, the officers descended, separating people into groups, asking for IDs, taking statements. Trevor was the loudest. Belligerent. Stupid. Emily tried to slink away, but one of the officers stopped her. Asked her name. Asked if she was part of the group. She stammered, trying to explain, trying to distance herself. But it was too late. Someone had already pulled out their phone and started recording. Videos. Photos. By the time we finally got back to the hotel, it was clear the damage was done. The next morning, the story broke on social media. A viral post on a local Miami gossip page, corporate employees caught drunk and disorderly on Family Beach. And there, right in the background of one of the videos, was Emily, laughing, clinging to Trevor, blurry but unmistakable. Within hours, the clip made its way into our corporate group chats. Emails started flying. HR got involved. Meetings were scheduled. An internal investigation was launched. Emily's phone buzzed nonstop with notifications she couldn't ignore. Her double life wasn't a secret anymore. And this time, there was no explaining it away. No brushing it off. No laughing it off as my jealous imagination. For the first time in months, I didn't feel crazy. I felt vindicated. And I wasn't done yet. In the days that followed, everything spiraled faster than even I could have imagined. At first, Emily tried to act like it was no big deal. It was just a misunderstanding, she said, pacing our hotel room in her wrinkled sundress, biting her nails. HR will sort it out. They know I'm a good employee. It's not like I was the one causing trouble. She laughed, but there was no humor in it, just the brittle sound of someone desperately trying to convince herself that the walls weren't caving in. But she underestimated just how fast news spreads and just how brutal corporate politics can be. By noon the next day, the company issued a statement. They were investigating the incident involving employees during a private trip. They didn't name names, but everyone already knew. The videos were everywhere. I even got text messages from coworkers I hadn't spoken to in years. Is that your wife on the beach? With Trevor. Trevor, bless his drunken stupidity, hadn't made things any easier. Word had gotten out that he tried to mouth off to the police during the beach incident, making jokes about how he owned the company and was untouchable. HR took that about as well as you'd expect. By the end of that week, Emily was called into a mandatory video meeting with the executives. I sat across the hotel room pretending to scroll through my phone while secretly listening. Her voice was tense, her words rushed, trying to explain herself, trying to spin the story. But the faces on the screen were stony. No one bought it. Especially not when the gossip got worse. Apparently, someone from Trevor's team leaked internal messages, *TS of drunken group chats from that night where Trevor bragged about banging his way to the top and joked about cutting dead weight back at the office. Emily's name was mentioned more than once. It didn't matter that she hadn't sent those messages herself. Guilt by association was enough. And maybe if it had been just the beach scandal, maybe they would have slapped her on the wrist. Issued a warning, put her on probation. Companies can be remarkably forgiving when it comes to protecting their own. But what they couldn't forgive was the optics. In the videos, Emily wasn't just present. She wasn't just a background figure. She was clinging to Trevor. Laughing. Drunk. The optics were devastating, a senior employee behaving recklessly, partying in public, tied up in rumors of an affair with a direct colleague. It was a PR nightmare waiting to explode. So the company did what companies do best, they cut their losses. 2 days after the beach incident, while we were still in Miami, Emily got the call. She put it on speaker without realizing I was nearby. Effective immediately, the HR director said in a clipped voice, "Your contract is terminated. Your access to company systems has been revoked. You'll receive final instructions regarding severance and property return via email. Good luck." Click. That was it. 10 years of work wiped away in a 60-second phone call. I watched her crumble, sitting on the edge of the bed with her face in her hands, her body shaking. For a moment, a brief, flickering moment, I almost felt sorry for her. This wasn't how either of us had pictured the end of our vacation. Or our marriage. Meanwhile, Trevor wasn't faring much better. Rumor had it he'd been suspended pending investigation, but everyone knew what that really meant. In our industry, once you get tagged as a liability, it's just a matter of time. He tried posting some half-hearted defense online, something about how it was all a witch hunt, but it only made things worse. *TS from the beach, blurry and damning, followed him everywhere he went. I guess in some twisted way, Emily and Trevor got exactly what they wanted, a break from the boring old routines. They just didn't expect the price tag. The irony is, Emily had spent so much time plotting to leave me, to take the company, to start her new life, and in the end, she lost everything. Not because I exposed her. Not because I fought back, but because she couldn't even protect herself from herself. The very recklessness that excited her, the lies she told herself about freedom and passion, the secret life she thought she could control, all of it blew up in her face without me lifting a finger. And I wasn't done. Back in the room, as she sobbed quietly into a pillow, I sat at the desk, calmly backing up the final files from her second phone onto a hard drive. Every message, every photo, every ugly little secret she thought I'd never find, they were all mine now. Proof. Evidence. Insurance. Because when we got home, I knew exactly what I was going to do. Emily thought losing her job was rock bottom. She had no idea how much further she could fall. The flight home was silent. Emily stared out the window the whole time, her hands folded in her lap like a scolded child. I didn't speak either. What was there left to say? She knew it was over, even if she wasn't ready to admit it out loud yet. The day after we landed, I met with my lawyer. I handed him everything, the *TS, the texts, the photos, the news articles about the beach incident. He went through it slowly, his face betraying no emotion except for a slight nod of approval. You have more than enough, he said simply. This will be very clean for you. Emily, of course, tried to play defense. When she was served with the divorce papers, she spun a new story, how I had been controlling, aggressive, how she had felt oppressed in our marriage. She tried to flip the narrative, painting herself as the victim. But the evidence didn't lie. The court saw the full story, her infidelity, her secret life, her betrayal not just of me but of the partnership we had built together. She was found guilty of violating the marital agreement. The judge awarded me the apartment, the majority of our shared funds, and even certain professional rights related to our business. Emily walked out of court that day with nothing but her purse and her shame. To make matters worse, her firing had followed her. Word spread quickly in our industry. No one wanted to hire someone associated with scandal. She burned her bridges and had no one to blame but herself. And for once, I didn't feel guilt. I didn't feel pity. I felt free.